this is it. This is all you're going to get to see of me up here this year. I know you're disappointed, aren't you? I mean, I had the perfect presentation prepared. Budgeting and you, a good time for all. All right, I'm up here to take a minute to introduce our first keynote speaker. His name is Mark Wayne. A lot of you have dealt with him. We've had a tremendous relationship with ANX, and he provides a tremendous service, and we wanted to give him an opportunity to come up here and talk to you all, because as we've seen constantly through the papers, there's constant issues with companies, very big companies, with PCI issues and breaches. So we wanted to make sure you all are up on the latest information that's out there, so that's why we had him come in. Mark is is the Executive Vice President of Governance and Risk Compliance for ANX. He's authored the nationally recognized book, 18 Steps to PCI Compliance, a guide for small businesses to achieve and maintain PCI compliance. And he's viewed as a national expert. Prior to joining ANX, Mark spent over 20 years as a technology executive focused on secure data transfer. Additionally, he served with the U.S. Air Force, where he served as a military code breaker for the NSA. All right, so Mark holds a degree from Central Michigan University and an MBA from the University of Detroit. Please join me in welcoming Mark Wayne.
All right, thanks, Scott. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes my job today is to really help to educate you. 2 days in the month of October, I get to help educate, and these are the best days of the month for me, because the other 29 days I'm fighting this electronic E. coli, as I call it, working with the Secret Service and the FBI Cybercrime Unit, trying to remediate breaches that have occurred. And I'll tell you, I've been in this job for 7 years, and clearly in the last year, since last October, we've seen more activity in the last year than the previous 5 years, 6 years combined. So what do you think about when you look at these brands? These are all trusted brands. You think about a year ago, all of these brands, when you went into any one of these retail locations, whether it was Home Depot or Neiman Marcus, or you went into a food establishment, something like P.F. Chang's or Jimmy John's, these are all trusted, charismatic brands, as your chief brand officer would say. These are brands that when you walk in the door, you expected a certain result. You expected to be treated a certain way. You expected the quality to be there. And you expected every single time, regardless of location, to have that same experience. In the last 7 months, all of these brands have suffered a compromise. And what I'll tell you is that we've worked with 3 of these brands proactively to talk to them about their positioning, and had a similar meeting that we had today. 3 of those brands decided they were already taken care of. They had solutions in place that would protect them, and they decided to take the path of least resistance, and since then they've suffered a compromise. Unfortunately, especially the ones in the bottom right corner are the ones that are more relevant to you, because these are very heavily franchised brands. I'm going to talk about the impact of a breach to a corporation, and also the impact of the breach to the franchise owner, because I feel like I'm really speaking to you being the owner-operators today. Just one data point. Here's an example of Target, biggest breach known to date. I will tell you this will not be the biggest breach a year from now. All expectations are the Home Depot breach will exceed this. But $236 million in total breaches, pretty big number. 40 million cards were compromised, 70 million customers. You'll see that there are a lot of lawsuits, 140 lawsuits. The big thing that we're seeing is that all of this was civil. For the first time, though, in my career, we believe that some of the most recent breaches could have actual criminal proceedings against owners and C-level executives, because they're determining the fact they did not take the proper precautions to protect their customers' financial data. So 3 things I want to accomplish today. And really, this is an educational session. Number 1, I want to talk to you about the risk. Because ANX is both a qualified security assessor and an approved scanning vendor, we've got a very interesting purview in the market. We see data on every single breach in the country. What you see in the papers and what you see on the news represents about 10% of what's actually going on. We're going to talk a little bit about PCI compliance. PCI compliance is confusing. There's a lot of information there. I'm just going to hit the high points there. And then we're going to talk about 5 simple steps for you to protect your brand. I want to make sure when we walk away from today that you've got enough information that you can make a logical and conscious business decision as an owner to determine what do I want to do to protect my brand, my franchise, and my customers. So let's start out with the 5 key data points. These are all based upon empirical data, meaning these are all sourced. This is all based upon information we get as a QSA. The number in the top left, they're $80,000. If you're a franchise owner that has a single location and you suffer a breach, that's what you can expect to pay out of pocket. That has no impact on what the future will hold for your revenues and profits, but you're going to write a check for about $80,000. And as a result of that, over the last 3 years, 70% of the franchise locations that suffered a breach were out of business in 1 year. They simply cannot shoulder the financial burden of that compromise, but more importantly, the impact of what happens to the brand post-breach. On average, when a breach occurs to a brand, even a trusted brand like Melting Pot, you can expect to see a 36% reduction in revenue in your customer base in the following year. The number below there, 1 in 6, is interesting. Almost a year to this day, I went to a conference with the Internet Crime Complaint Center. That's the part of the U.S. government that looks at all cybercrime. They look at every single section of the market, they look at all the analytics, all the attacks, all the threat vectors, and they came up with a number. And last year, their managing director was on stage, and I sat in the audience like you did, and he put a graph up. And it looked like the proverbial hockey stick that I'd like to see with my revenue when I build my business plan every year. And what that hockey stick represented was their forecast on the number of breaches quarter over quarter over the next 3 years. He stood on that stage and he said, I clearly believe, based upon everything we know, it's not a matter of if these locations will be breached, it's a matter of when. And we thought the number was crazy, but you look at what's happened over the last year, these guys were spot on. And the reason is the U.S. government, the U.S. card nation, everyone in the country that takes credit cards, we're under attack. And the reason that we're under attack is because our card system is antiquated. There's only one other country in the world that has the same problem as the U.S., and that's Turkey. Everyone else has the next generation of credit card processing that protects the cardholder from swipe all the way through the merchant bank. But what happens with us is every time you swipe that card, there's a point from the point that it's swiped at your point of sale terminal all the way through the bank that there's an encryption gap where that data is in the open. And when that data is in the open, these cyber criminals find a way to get it. Now, we are dealing with a very sophisticated criminal here. This is not underemployed IT people. This is not bored college kids in the basements. 98% of the breaches that occurred in the U.S. over the last year can all be traced back to organized crime outside of the U.S. And they're so good that on average, when you suffer a compromise, it is 7 months before you realize you've been breached. And I'll tell you how good they are, is that we'll get into a little bit later our solution. But with our solution, when we put our firewall out, one of the things that our firewall does immediately when we plug it in is it takes inventory of all the MAC addresses in your network. And the first thing it does is it looks for malicious software throughout every nook and cranny of your network. 18% of the people of the company that we put our firewalls in place, when we plug it in, have suffered a breach and they're not aware of it. Because there is no degradation of service, there's no leading indicators, you're just trying to deliver a quality dining experience for your guests. There's no way that you or your IT staff can determine that you've suffered a breach. So how are they getting in? We talked about it, outdated firewalls. A lot of times we put a firewall, we buy it at Best Buy, you plug it in, you see a green light, you say, hey, I'm covered. Not the case. One of the things about us, we protect over 50,000 locations across the U.S. today. Some of our customers are very large. We do a lot of work with large government, Fortune 100. And what we do to protect you that's different than most companies is that when we find any kind of a threat vector or an attack, regardless of where it occurs in the year, in the world, will then write a policy change. That policy change will come back to our Security Operations Center, and then we'll distribute that update to every one of our 50,000 customers. So whether we're protecting the United Nations or the single location melting pot franchise owner, you're getting the same level of managed security. That's absolutely critical with these cyber criminals because they continually evolve. What they've got today is the way they attack is different than they attack in the future. If you take a look at the most recent breach with Kmart, they said it's the first time that they've got a malware that the antivirus could not detect and pick up. That's why the key to this solution is layers of security. You'll see that by the time we get done, we'll talk about the different layers. By having one item, such as I know that you've now gone through a new point of sale system with tokenization, that's fantastic. It's a layer. But you've got to have multiple layers because I can only guarantee you one thing, that every single day, most of you are feeling some kind of attack and you have no idea you're being attacked. What we can see is attacks that get through our external layers, and the key to our success is stopping that attack before it gets to the core. What is PCI compliance? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. The bottom right says it all. If you take a credit card, one debit card, regardless of how you process that, you must demonstrate PCI compliance. So just by a show of hands, how many of you believe you're PCI compliant? That's great. That's fantastic because a lot of times I speak to groups and you don't have many folks that are compliant. So for me, it's a benefit to be able to speak to an audience that understands the impact of credit card fraud and the importance of compliance. But here's a lot of the bottom line. There's a lot of myths about compliance. If my point of sale system is compliant, I'm compliant. It's not true. Your point of sale system has to be PA-DSS compliant, while you as merchants have to be PCI compliant. PCI compliance doesn't apply to my business. There's a lot of different reasons. Here's what's puzzling to me. I saw 75% of the hands go up, yet of all the breaches that occurred in the last 4 years, only 4% could demonstrate compliance. So let me ask you this quick quiz. Can you demonstrate that all of your cashiers were trained upon hire and annually the PCI certified training program? Can you demonstrate that every employee has read, comprehended, and signed off on a security awareness policy? And can you demonstrate that all access outside of your restaurant using something like log me in, go to my PC, any kind of VPN is doing so using two-factor authentication? And if you can't answer yes to all three of these questions, you simply cannot be compliant. So now by show of hands, how many of you are compliant? That's what I thought. That's why I'm glad I'm here. The bottom line is, I didn't make these questions up. I'm on the phone with the Secret Service almost every day. These are the first three questions they ask if you've been suspected of a breach. They want to determine, are you compliant or are you not? Because if you're compliant, there's a very different path they take from a financial responsibility. If you're not compliant, you're going to be stuck holding the bag. So what happens if you do suffer a breach? The first thing they're going to do is you're going to get a knock at the door from the Secret Service. And I'll tell you a funny story. It was interesting. I spoke at the National Restaurant Association meeting last couple of years, and I was in the middle of this conversation. It was a very large audience, probably 1,500 people. And all of a sudden, I get a gentleman in the fourth row stands up, and he says, "Excuse me, but I need to say something." And I'm thinking, oh boy, what's this guy going to say, right? I said, fine, bring him a mic. So they bring him a mic, and the guy stands up, and he says, "I just want to let you know that I've watched this guy speak now for 3 years, and every time this slide comes up, I roll my eyes." Right. Secret Service, sunglasses, earpiece, he's going to show up at my spot. Well, I've got to tell you, I'm the CEO of Penn Station Subs, and this guy showed up at my front door. It was the worst day of my professional career, and I would advise you to listen to this guy. So I'm thinking, wow, what a great plant, right? But the bottom line is he had heard it for several years, and he never thought it would happen to him. The difference, though, today is, what we have today is what I call a zero-distance attack. It makes no difference if you've got a single location melting pot in, and I know where some of you are, so I'll make a city up, Adrian, Michigan, or in Biloxi, Mississippi. The bottom line is the way they attack is through IP address. So it doesn't make any difference where you're geographically located. You're all equally vulnerable. So anyway, once the Secret Service knocks on the door, they say, unfortunately, Mr. Pierce, looks like this location, the melting pot, has been identified as a common point of purchase. That's the Secret Service's vernacular to say you've been breached. So you need to immediately unplug your point of sale system, which, by the way, most melting pot owners today are probably processing 90% plus of your transactions by credit card. You're now a cash-only shop. Imagine the impact to your business if you become a cash-only shop, and if you're not prepared, you'll be in that capacity for 6 to 9 months. The next thing you have to do is you've got 48 hours to initiate a forensic audit. That forensic audit is going to cost you somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. That check will be written up front. When the forensic audit comes back, they give it to a company like ours, a qualified security assessor. We then use that as our playbook, and we dig into the network and we figure out what actually occurred. Was it a skimmer? Was it some kind of phishing expedition? Was it malware? What happened? Where is the malicious activity? We dig it up, we fix the network, and then we work to make you compliant. All in, if you are not protected and you are not prepared, $80,000 cash out of pocket, 6 to 9 months cash only shop. That is why it's important for you to know that you, 18% of the customers we deal with, have suffered a breach and they're not even aware of it. So let's talk about how we can help. 5 steps. Step number 1. And we introduced this step about 3 years ago for the pure fact that 18% of the customers we plugged our firewall in were already breached and we didn't even know it. The first thing we do before anything is make sure you've got our data breach protection. And I will go on stage today, being recorded, hand in the air, saying it is the only one of its kind in the country. We will protect you, number 1, regardless of your level of compliance. If you're breached and the Secret Service calls and you fail that audit, you're still protected. The second thing is, when you sign up with us, in 5 business days, you're covered, guarantees. Unless you suffered a breach that you've not told us about that's been publicly recognized that we'll find in the records, you're covered. The third one is critical. Retroactive coverage back to the beginning of time. I will tell you that last month we signed another very large brand. We brought on almost 1,000 locations. And of those 1,000 locations, there were 33 of those that we brought on immediately that had suffered a breach. And before they made their first payment to us, they were covered with $100,000 a day breach protection. The reason is we will give you retroactive coverage back to the beginning of time. So let's play that out and see if something would happen. I'm going to use Scott again. So Scott's got we'll say he's a franchise owner, although I know he's corporate. Secret Service shows up at Scott's location. Scott, unfortunately, you've got a common point of purchase. You need to unplug your point of sale system. You need to get a forensic audit. The forensic audit comes back and it says, yes, Scott, this breach occurred a year ago. Clearly, Scott was not a customer of ANX a year ago. But because the breach was not publicly acknowledged, we will protect him back to the inception of that breach. The reason that that is important is the bank is going to make you replace every credit and debit card swiped at that location over that 1-year period. $25 to $35 a card. Under this program, you're covered. The next thing we do is we give you access to our portal. It's like a TurboTax for PCI. And what this portal will do is, first of all, it's a great knowledge center for everything in compliance. Our goal is not to make you compliance experts. That's why you partner with us. We do this every day. We understand that all you want to worry about is driving the best possible business that you can drive, be the best possible melting pot in the country. Let us work with you to get information from you, but let us be your compliance partner. First thing you're going to be able to do here is we're going to be able to upload all your employees, assign the necessary PCI certified training, get them trained. The next thing is we'll create a template, a policy required by PCI for security awareness, assign it to all your employees, make sure they read it, comprehend it, get it signed off. The third thing we do, which is important, is we'll do an external vulnerability scan of your network. 9 times out of 10, that scan comes back to us screaming red. There's a lot of problems. We expect that. We're going to help you remediate that scan, and then we're going to move forward. The last thing is determine your self-assessment questionnaire. I will tell you that today, most of you are self-assessment questionnaire C, which is 84 questions, or a D, which is 244. As of January 1st, when PCI 3.0 comes out, the complexity of those self-assessment questionnaires is going to grow exponentially. They're going to move away from yes-no answers. You're going to have to make sure you've got a PCI compliance partner, whether it's ANX or someone else. Make sure they're a qualified security assessor to help you. Step number 3, and you guys have already taken this position. Find a secure, robust point-of-sale solution. There are a lot of great solutions in the cloud. You want to try to add a layer of security through tokenization. Make sure it's a consistent solution across the brand. Again, I tip my hat to the Melting Pot and Front River Brands Corporate. They've been visionaries here. They've seen this. This makes sense. This is one less thing for you to worry about, but unfortunately, it is not the silver bullet. I'm sure there's a lot of you that say, this is crazy. We're going to invest in this solution. Why do I need someone like ANX? The answer is very simple. You have to, one, you have to be compliant, or you're going to be held holding the bag. And number 2 is, I can guarantee you, no matter how good the system is, they will find a way to break in. You have to have a stateful inspection firewall with layered security to protect you. Number 4, achieve and maintain compliance. This is where we come out and we put our secure cloud gateway. We've got a unique firewall that is unlike anyone else's in the market, because we take that firewall, we wrap our PCI compliance secret sauce around it. The first thing that firewall does when it plugs in is does that inventory of your network. We want to see, have you been compromised and you're not aware of it. Once we know that you've got a clean bill of health, then we start engaging all the required PCI specs. We do the internal scanning, we do the rogue wireless. Rogue wireless is another one. What we're seeing is a huge increase in the number of breaches caused by skimmers. You can buy a skimmer for about $100 on the dark side of the internet, and if I had a skimmer in my pocket today, I can guarantee you that I'd know every credit card from the first 4 tables here without you opening your wallet or your purse. I did a similar experiment at the National Retail Federation show 2 years ago and almost caused a fight. So I won't do it again. But I wanted to prove a point that I could have a skimmer in my pocket. I did it in New York. Bad idea. Bad idea. And I would say to Scott, I'd say, how about an S. Pierce? How do you like that Platinum Amex 224411? You know, and I'd say, hey, it looks like you had a little activity in it last month. And all of a sudden, people are getting up and they're getting very agitated with me. But my point, again, is we all love technology. We live and die by technology. But we want to leverage all the positive attributes of technology and turn a deaf ear to the risk. There's risk. But what I will show you with these 5 steps, for the equivalent of about one dinner tab a month, you can protect your brand, your investments, and your customers. The next thing that we do is absolutely critical. If you think about some of the mistakes companies like Target made, was the fact is after the breach occurred, the actions they took were very poorly planned. We see this every day. When I'm on the phone with a franchise owner, it's horrible. It is gut-wrenching. It is heartbreaking. We'll get the owner on the phone, and the first thing we ask them the first 3 questions. They deem to be non-compliant. They've got to foot the bill themselves. And I always hear from the franchise owner the same phrase, wow, I wish I would have known. My goal today is to make sure if something bad happens to you and I'm on the other end of the phone, you can't say, I wish I would have known. My goal today is to educate you on the risk. The other thing we do for our customers is create a crisis management plan. It may seem like a simple experiment, a simple task, but it is absolutely critical. If you're not prepared and you suffer a breach as a brand or as a franchise owner, social media will eat you alive. Before you even understand you've been breached, I guarantee it'll be tweeted, it'll be on Facebook, it'll be on LinkedIn, it'll be all over the country. And the impact will be immediately felt by everyone in the audience. This brand is only as good as its weakest link. When I walk in a Melting Pot, I don't care what part of the country it is in, I expect the same level of experience. So if I've got a franchise owner that decides to be a rogue franchise owner and not protect the brand, and that location is compromised, it has an impact on all of you. So that's why it's important that you really think about this as a brand decision. Your brand is everything in the market. The Melting Pot today is a trusted brand. I know as a consumer, if I go to the Melting Pot, what to expect. The thing we're going to do here, though, is today if you were breached, I guarantee you'd be running around with your hair on fire. The wrong people would be saying the wrong things to the media. Some people would be saying nothing. You'd be tucking it under the rug. The bottom line is we want to make sure you've got a crisis management plan together. We'll work with you to put this plan together so that if something bad happens, we've all got very distinct roles. We're moving forward with purpose. We know exactly what the message is, who to say it, and when to say it. So, wrapping up. Our experience tells us three things. Number one, and this is a hard pill to swallow, you cannot do this on your own. Your local IT guy cannot do it. Your daughter's boyfriend, who is a computer science undergrad, who is the smartest computer guy you've ever met, can't do it. This is a full-time job for companies like ours, a qualified security assessor, an approved scanning vendor. This is all we do 24/7. And if you think that that's not a true statement, I'm not sure if any of you have ever been to DEF CON. Anybody ever been to DEF CON? So DEF CON is a show out in Vegas where they bring Fortune 100 companies come out with their IT staffs, and they're the smartest, they are the best and brightest in the world. And I've been a part of this program where you'll have a couple of the hackers here, and we have the smartest brands walk up, and all they have to do is hand us a business card. And in that business card, they give it to the hackers, and the hackers start going away and type in feverishly on their computer. And the deal is that just through that business card, if the hacker doesn't break into your network to give them something confidential, now mind you, this is Fortune 100 companies. Within 5 minutes, they'll buy dinner and drinks for the whole team anywhere in Vegas. I've yet to see a Fortune 100 company get that free dinner. So these are companies that spend millions of dollars on security. You've got to make sure you've got the right partner. The next thing is security is an evolving standard. One of the things that we're going to talk about today at the vendor show is how we're going to be able to use our firewall and our Wi-Fi with our partner Airtight to give you analytics. We're doing this with some of our other partners, and it is a fantastic tool. Again, a way to leverage technology. To use the Wi-Fi not only for the customer, the customer to log in, but to get really great data on that customer, and then turn those analytics into marketing data, and turn the marketing data into more consistent revenue. It's fantastic. But again, it's just another step in the evolution. The final slide, and this is the most important slide of the day. You cannot do this with a silver bullet. There are layers and layers of security that are required. I'll give you a great example of what happened with Target. So Target has got one of probably the most prominent IDS IPS system in the country called FireEye. It will detect any kind of breach, being their external, the perimeter of their layered security. When the breach occurred, FireEye nailed it right away. So their call center out in India, one of the guys said, oh, the alarm went off, FireEye's got it, looked at it, yep, layer 1 has been infiltrated. Picked up the phone, called the U.S. Security Operations Center, said we've got an infiltration layer 1, we've got a potential breach. U.S. Security Center said got it, hung up the phone, and then went back to doing the fantasy football draft or whatever. So PCI compliance and protecting your brand is about technology, and it's about people and process. In Target's case, the technology worked, but the people and the process broke. It was like a Pearl Harbor scenario. So what happened was, by the time they realized what happened now, because the alarm went off, the operations center got it, they moved forward as they should have, they then went about their business, but the U.S. operations didn't acknowledge it. And because of that, they lost critical hours and days and a week before they realized what had happened. The key to our success, and again, if I had some wood, I'd knock on it, over 50,000 locations, and we specialize in restaurants. 50,000 locations we protect today, we've never, ever had a breach. I didn't think about it till this morning, I should have brought, though, of all the melting pots that we support today, I should have brought the chart that shows how many attacks we protected in the last week for those melting pots. You would be staggered at the number of attacks that those firewalls are being hit with every single day. And again, if your local IT guy is managing that for you, I can guarantee you at some point that attack is going to get through. But because we invest millions upon millions of dollars in our technology and continually evolve, trying to stay a step ahead of them, we know that they're going to break through. And we get level 1, level 2 attacks that they're through the first level or the second level of security on a daily basis. But they'll never get to the core. And it's all about the layers. So the bottom line is, it's really your decision. My job today is just to try to give you the facts. And this is not, I'm sure it sounds like a sales pitch. I run this team. I live in this world. My wife tells me when we go out socially, I cannot talk about business because it's too depressing. But the bottom line is, it's the world we live in. And it's not going to get any better. EMV, the new generation of credit cards, will not be in the U.S. in place until 2017, mark my word. It's great that you guys are taking steps through a new point of sale system and tokenization. It's a good first step. It's not enough. You need to make that investment. And again, if you think about it, at the end of the day, I call it electronic E. coli. If someone came to you as a brand and said, we've got a real issue, we've got an epidemic of bad meat, bad cheese, whatever it is, throughout the country. And the risk is you can roll the dice, and maybe the cheese and the meat that you get is going to be good, but there's a good chance 1 in 6 of you will get E. coli. Or you can invest a couple $100 a month and take that risk down from 1 in 6 to 1 in many hundreds of thousands. Because what we found about the cyber criminal is the cyber criminal has got so much low-hanging fruit. There's 5.4 million targets in the U.S. for them to attack. They will attack once and try to get through. They'll attack twice and try to get through. They'll attack a third time. But after 3 or 4 times, if they can't get by, they're going to go somewhere else that's easier for them to attack. We want to make sure that the melting pot next year, in 5 years, in 10 years, continues to flourish and continues to be the trusted brand that it is today. And the only way that we can do that is together to protect the brand. That's all I've got. Appreciate the time.